Hi, everyone. Today, I'd like to introduce Michael Byrne. He is the co-founder and CEO of Bia Neuroscience. They're working on neurotech to help you sleep. Prior to Bia Neuroscience, Michael spent time as a general manager at Simply, an operations manager at Nested Naturals, and both an operations manager and a neurofeedback technician at Valentis Medical Technologies. Michael holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from University of Victoria. So Michael, I gave a brief introduction there, but I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your story. We'd love to hear about your journey and your background and all of the things that brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, and I'll go in the reverse sequence there. What led me to psychology. I've always been curious about the why. Um, you know, why do people hug? Why do people shake hands? How do we hold eye contact differently? Why do we communicate? Just why do people behave the way they do? So that led me towards the psychology path. When I started studying in psychology, I quickly was learning, okay, well, a lot of this is stemming from the brain. So then I started exploring much more into the biopsychology realm. And I ended up doing an internship with the group specialized in paranoid schizophrenia. And I pretty quickly learned studying psychology and working in psychology are two vastly different things. I was looking for a little bit more of that. I don't know if excitement is quite the right word, but there's a lot that can come from studying that field, and working in it is quite difficult and upsetting. You see people really struggling, and I was able to learn from that experience that working in the field isn't necessarily what I want to do. So I started doing summer semesters, finished my degree in a little over 3 years, and just got out into the working world. Joined the clinic at Valentis there, worked as a neurofeedback technician to try and expose myself to as much as I possibly could while still in this field that I was interested in. And at the clinic, one of the main questions we asked was, how was your sleep? So anytime someone came in, then whatever the next day after their sessions, how was your sleep? Many different reasons to do that, but it's an easier experience for people to explain with some level of quantifiable. How many hours did you get? Did you wake up, 3, 4 times, or did you wake up 2 times this time? So through that process, I was getting introduced to the concept and the importance of sleep, and kind of stuck in my mind as I was going through there. And yeah, it just became more and more important and clearer to me how vital quality sleep is. So I, continued to work at the clinic, but I started liking to work on the systems of the clinic. And, I like to joke I studied psychology to learn that I'll become my father. He has his MBA and he worked on the business side. So I ended up going towards the business side, really liked working on the systems of the clinic and started pursuing that more. And when I saw an opportunity to work for a health supplement company, Nested Naturals, that was focused on sleep, I took it. I jumped at the opportunity. That is actually where I met my co-founder here at BIA, Andrew Jolie. He was the very first hire there. He handled everything on the front end, building the website, all the marketing, the branding. I was handling everything on the back end, and we were able to grow that company. Loved working with him. And as time developed, we moved on. We did our own things, but we really wanted to find a way to work together again. And I always wanted to get back into neurotech. He, had his background from IBM. It was kind of a perfect fit. So we started looking into the neurotech field and researching companies out there, customer discovery, looking at what problems best fit and where our skills lie. And through that discovery process, we spent a good year and a half doing that, looking through hundreds of companies, surveying thousands of people. We ended up right back in the sleep space and neurofeedback. So that's what brought us to today.
Yeah, it's really cool how it kind of came full circle and you guys ended up circling back around to the sleep space. Before we hop in and talk more about the details, I was wondering if we could rewind a little bit and kind of dive into what really sparked that initial involvement or interest in neuroscience or neurotechnology. What was it mainly just as you mentioned, pivot out of the psychology realm, like you were exploring psychology, but then you started to become more interested in like the neural basis of the psychology, or or were there other factors that fed into that interest as well?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was continuing down that path of why. Why do we behave the way we do? And I think that tied into, okay, well, this is the way we behave, but why we behave like that, why, we move the way we do, that's going to be more on a neural basis. So I kept going down that why pathway, and it just led down towards the neuroscience path.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess to dive a little bit deeper into sleep in particular, I think you had mentioned at one point you were working in like a psychology or neuroscience related position. One of the things that patients or customers would be asked was about their sleep. And so is that also kind of what kept that interest in sleep burning? Maybe not like a proxy for neural behavior, but window into mental health and maybe even physical health too. You can tell a lot about a person or a lot about a system or a lot about an animal, for example, but by how well they're sleeping.
Yeah, yeah, and so yeah, to go to the basis of the question there on what brought in the sleep aspect. So that was at the neurofeedback clinic, and to slow things down a little bit there, it was working with the EEG sensors, assessing brain activity, setting up programs for a bit more on the active neurofeedback side of encouraging adjustment. It was a lot of concussion, anxiety, depression that we had coming through the door there. And we asked about sleep. Part of it, the question that stuck out to me and that I learned through the process is when you're dealing with people that are suffering from depression, it's not usually a good idea to ask them, how are you doing today? They're either going to give you the generic answer and lie and say, oh yeah, I'm good, how are you doing? And they're just going to skim over it, or it's going to remind them that they're not in a good place. So it's just not a good question to ask. So you kind of avoid that question. And what we did instead was asking about sleep. And I know it's not a great thing to ask people with insomnia either, but in the clinic, we were asking, well, how was your sleep? How many hours did you get? Did you wake up a bunch? How did you feel when you woke up? And that was, as you were saying, it was a proxy to how well are they responding to the sessions? Are they feeling better in some manageable way? And you jot these down, you see if there's any improvements across time within their sleep.
Now to make a quick pivot and start to talk more about Bia itself. So could you tell us in a little bit more detail, could you tell us the founding story of Bia Neuroscience? We'd love to hear about how you and your co-founder got started with all of this and where things have really progressed from there.
Yeah, yeah. When we first started, we were actually looking at methods of cognitive enhancement, specifically memory. That was one thing we were both very interested in it and wanted to see how could we best do that, again, using our skills and our background. So we actually looked at TDCS, we looked at TMS. We don't have a background in medical technology. So when we started looking at the various companies out there, the ones that were doing fantastic, like Flow Neuroscience, fantastic job they've done there on TMS. It's a medical grade product. That's not our area of expertise. And when we started doing a bit of the customer discovery, if we were to try and do anything like that on the consumer realm, people were not comfortable with it. So that's what ended up moving us back to what's the simplest form of modulation that we can do, and in what way can we create the greatest amount of impact. So when we looked at something like neurofeedback for memory, we weren't seeing strong enhancement and strong progress there, because we saw comfort with audio neurofeedback, and we were discussing, we chatted all the time, and we had this in-depth conversation of why are we avoiding sleep? Like, we saw how revolutionary that was for people and how much it changed people's lives when they started getting quality sleep. That was such a big difference for people. Why are we avoiding this? Let's just go back right to where we have the bread and butter. We've dealt with thousands and thousands of people with poor sleep, and we've helped them improve. Let's do that even better. We know what the sleep market's like. We know where there's gaps. Let's take it to the next level. Let's build something that's going to make a revolutionary difference for people's sleep.
Yeah, it sounds like it was kind of a eureka moment when you and your co-founder really landed on that aspect of things you wanted to focus on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was kind of the eyes wide open experience. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then to fast forward a little bit, I'd love to hear a bit more detail about Bia Neuroscience's first product. What kind of capabilities does it have, and who would it be generally a good fit for?
Yeah. So we built a smart sleep mask, one that goes over the eyes, not a CPAP, but a smart sleep mask. And we put in some neurotechnology in there, and we have a personalized AI in there as well to improve every aspect of the sleep experience, each stage. To kind of walk you through the experience of it, you put on the mask to fall asleep. We know that your intention is to fall asleep. We're measuring, we use FNIRS, functional near infrared spectroscopy, to measure activity on what's going on in the brain. And based on that, we see, you're wide awake. Okay, you're trying to get to sleep, you're wide awake. We need to close this loop. We need to get you towards that goal. So we have more or less two sets of audio. One set which is what we call it neural music. The methodology there is functioning brain entrainment. We're playing music that mimics the N1 state of sleep to encourage your brain to go towards that stage of sleep. And then we have an active neurofeedback. Think of it like white noise, and your goal is to quiet the noise. So you're wearing the mask, your goal is to try and quiet that noise. And when you go towards that path, you get a bit of encouragement. If you go away, you get a bit of discouragement to get your brain to improve and learn across time of going from that awake state to falling asleep. And then we have brain entrainment throughout the night, keep you asleep, making sure you're getting that high quality sleep. And that's where that personalized AI comes in, is across time, we learn what a good sleep is for you and a bad night's sleep is for you. And we encourage your brain to go towards that good night's sleep. And then in the morning, you set your alarm for 8 a.m., let's say. We work with some optical engineers. We have a sunrise experience in the mask. So we mimic the sunrise to get those hormones kicked in. And it's just a much more pleasant way to wake up. We'll have pleasant audio that coming through, but also just sunlight directly in the mask, instead of waking up to the typical alarm beeping, on the nightstand next to you. It's going to be right there, soothing surround sound experience right in the mask. In terms of target demographics, as I was alluding to earlier, not a medical device. We're not here to cure or diagnose or treat anything. We're here to help the general public improve their sleep.
Got it. Well, yeah, thanks for explaining all those details to us. Seems like a pretty awesome product. I did have a quick follow-up question. You mentioned that there was an audio component involved. Are the speakers for the audio component right there in the mask, or is it Bluetoothed out to an external audio source?
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite parts. So I'm a side sleeper. I cannot sleep with earbuds in. My ears kill the next day. I've tried a bunch of the sleep masks with just like the speakers over the ears. Same thing, like my ear would have hurt for 2 to 3 days afterwards. So it wasn't a solution for me. So what we actually use is conduction speakers. So all of our electronics sit right here. We've got like a ski goggle design. No hard parts touch you. It's part of why we're using near infrared spectroscopy. There's no electronics. You don't have any contact. It's just a soft layer of foam. Worked with the materials engineer on that as well. But the speakers are there as well. And the speakers essentially drive against that inner layer of foam. So there's an outer, there's the housing for all the electronics, and then there's an inner layer of foam. And that inner layer of foam essentially becomes the conduction pathway for the audio. And an accidental discovery we had with this was that it creates like a surround sound experience, because sound will ripple back and forth in the mask.
Yeah.
Incredibly soothing experience. And the other advantage with conduction drivers is, unless you're touching it, you won't hear a thing. So you could be wearing it right next to your partner in your bed. They will have no idea that there's any audio at all.
I'm sure that all the side sleepers are excited to hear.
Yeah.
You mentioned that there's not necessarily a earbud or headphone component to this.
Yeah.
Another question that I had with regards to Bia Neuroscience is, are there any competitors working in the same or similar space? And if so, like what differentiates your company, Bia, from kind of the competitors also working on sleep, for example?
Yeah, the one I would mention that is most direct is Muse. They have the Muse S. They're based out of Toronto. We're based out of Vancouver. A couple of Canadian companies for you there. Yeah, so I think they've done a fantastic job. If I think if I was to advise people, if you're thinking I will never sleep with a sleep mask, I hate having a sleep mask over my eyes. Doesn't matter how comfortable it is, I will never do it. Check out the Muse S. They've done a great job. Great product. A couple key differentiators Theirs is a headband that goes around uh, the head, like a little bit more across the forehead, and they're using EEG. So sleep mask versus headband, EEG versus Stephaniers. But yeah, I'm a huge supporter of the neurotech field. I want to make sure all the companies out here are going to succeed, do their very best. Nothing but great things to say about the company.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an exciting field, and at least from how you're describing it here, it kind of looks like it almost comes down to personal preference or what setup they might prefer as they go to sleep at night.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's finding the right thing for you. That's going to be the most important thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You're a businessman who's passionate about neurotech and sleep. A lot of the people that listen to this podcast are also passionate about these same things. And so, a question that I had for you is how did you find your technical and scientific co-founders, for example, and then also just other scientists to work on these big problems with you? I know you mentioned you have a technical co-founder that has some past experience at IBM, and then I know you also mentioned you've worked with I believe materials engineers and optical engineers on various problems. And so yeah, just wondering how you're able to kind of assemble this team around you, and if you can talk through some of the details on that.
Yeah, I'll split it up into like two parts here. So, for people out there that are looking to find a co-founder, um, the advice I would give is find someone that you enjoy arguing with. Because if you both never argue, you're not really supporting one another. You're just another person that's helping take off workload. You should have different perspectives, different ways of looking at things, and enjoy disagreeing. Because if you don't enjoy disagreeing, you're going to get one down. It won't work long term. But if you enjoy it, you'll find that converge pathway and get a much broader spectrum of how to get there. I was fortunate enough to have that direct experience working with Andrew prior. Same thing. He was the first hire, was the second hire. We have functionally got to live that startup experience. I remember once we were in the office, discussing how we could best approach a campaign until about 5 a.m. in the morning. We realized the sun was rising. And that stuck with me because I actually really enjoyed that time. I enjoyed having like an all-nighter discussion about something. And I think that's part of what drove me to work with him again, was I really enjoy disagreeing with him. And of course, he has complementary skills, different angle and approach, and just incredibly talented at what he does. In terms of finding technical staff, on the engineering side, we've worked with over 7 different types of engineers, like types of engineers, not engineers, but 7 different types. Just the nature of our product. It's very diverse. The great thing I have enjoyed on this front is people don't pursue their PhDs and go into the scientific community because they want to drive Lamborghinis and live in mansions. They pursue it because of a passion for what they're working in, for the curiosity and discovery process. And because of that, I find that they are absolutely fantastic people to discuss and work with, and finding I think that's such a rare thing to have people dedicate their lives to something that they enjoy rather than chasing dollars and cents and maximizing their income. So a lot of respect for the community in that, and I actually found it much easier to find experts. I mean, even just going on like Google Scholar and seeing who wrote articles, you can find names. You can look at competitors on LinkedIn, or existing companies or secondary companies, and you can find people that worked in that space. People that would like comment on podcasts like this. Who are the type of people that are engaging in this community, and where are they? Follow the podcast, see who's engaging with it, who's listening to it. They're going to be curious. Neurotech X is another great space. They have job boards. We posted on there a couple times too. So yeah, just finding those communities in that space, it's been actually a great experience finding people.
Yeah, both of those descriptions really resonated with me. I'd especially say what you mentioned about, finding a co-founder that you can have healthy debates with is super helpful, because, you don't want just somebody who will say yes to all of your ideas as a co-founder. You want them to be able to give you like feedback or point out if you're messing something up. It also really resonated with me about how passionate the scientific community is especially about this space and how, you know, they're really a lot of people in that community have really devoted their lives to doing this science in order to help others.
Yeah, 100%.
To talk a little bit more about the business side of the industry, or the, you know, the business side of the company, would you be able to share any sorts of unique skills or mindsets that are required to be a business operator in a space, in like a very technical space such as like neuroscience or sleep science?
Yeah, I could have a bias in this, but I personally think like it's about not having any unique skills. As a business operator, it's about finding the right people with those unique skills and supporting them, and having if there is a mindset to take, it would just be an extreme level of diligence. Uh, you're going to be working with such a wide range of challenges, skill sets, approaches, and what you need to know is your user needs inside out. You should be able to almost recite them word for word from memory. And when you're talking to someone, being comfortable to ask the question, even though, materials engineer, for example, I know nothing about the cellular structure of foam and how that changes in different manufacturing processes. So I need to still ask those questions of, when they start describing what we need to do to create this as breathable and cooling, but still very soft. I need to be able to ask the questions of, okay, wait, is it, they talk about it making it super soft, but it then traps in all the heat. I need to be able to ask all the questions I need to make sure, am I getting the check marks that I need for this aspect of the product for those user needs? You do need to have the technical skills on, finance, marketing, supply chain, what have you. You need to have those, but that really shouldn't be the main focal point. If you're trying to launch a product in the neurotech space, your main objective is, what are all the user needs we need to hit? Are we building towards it? That's a vast majority of what you need to do. And the rest of your responsibilities, you kind of need to nail those in silence, because your team doesn't need to know that the books aren't balancing, or a campaign wasn't working as you intended on the marketing side. They need to stay focused on what they're doing, and you kind of need to nail your stuff in silence.
I totally see where you're coming from there. And, I think that's a lot of good advice for our followers who might be interested in joining the business side of a company like this, or even potentially founding a company. And I think some of the main things you hit on there, where you have to have a lot of curiosity and be able to ask the necessary questions to really understand the full picture, and really be able to have maybe, like, I would say, a lot of breadth, and be able to kind of touch lots of different aspects of the company.
Yeah, and actually one thing I would expand a little bit on there that was a learning process for me was, like, you really need to keep your ego in check, because you're probably going to ask a question that someone is going to think is the dumbest question they've ever heard, and you need to be okay with that. And because if you don't know or understand it, something might get missed. And, especially when you're working with hardware, if that one thing you miss gets built and developed, and then you experience it and there's a problem, that was easily 2-3 months of time that you just lost, because you didn't ask that question and spend the 5-10 minutes going through something you didn't understand to begin with. It's much easier to batch those iterations, and you need to be keeping that ego at the door. If there's something at all that you're tiniest bit unclear on, you need to ask, because it's going to cost you so much in time and money.
Yeah, definitely important to, leave nothing left unsaid, because, as you mentioned, just not asking a question or not understanding something that you may have been confused about can be a really expensive mistake.
Yeah, exactly.
Are there ever any challenges, like, associated with, for example, like aligning business strategy with, like, the technical goals and reality of the technical side of things, or even vice versa, like flipping that on its head? Any, like, challenges associated with making sure that, both the business side and the technical side are lockstep and working smoothly together?
Yeah, there's tons, and it's constant. I wouldn't say we have this 100% nailed down, but the way I try to look at it is, it's about finding the balance between quality, speed, and cost. And you've got these 3 baskets, and there's only a finite number of marbles that you can put in each basket. So if you want things way faster, well, guess what? That cost is going to start to suffer, and possibly quality as well. But at the best case scenario, you're getting 2 out of the 3. And the way we've kind of compartmentalized things, that was kind of giving people owners in those 3 categories. So like on my side, business objectives, let's focus on speed. Let's try and get things built as quickly as possible, get that feedback, move towards getting this into the market. And then the technical team's pushing a lot more on the quality side of things. They push quality and cost. I say no on the cost, and I'll touch a bit more on that in a bit here. But their focus is, I want them to dream about making the best product ever made for sleep. That's what they're focused on. And then I say, no, that's going to take too long. Is this necessary for now? Can we do this 6 months from now? Can we do this a year from now? Can we do this in the next iteration? Because otherwise we're just going to wait and wait and wait. And, we'll never actually get the product out into the market. So I want them to push on that side. I push on the speed side. We find that balance. And then one thing, on the budget side of things, I think a lot of people, especially, like team members, will instinctively limit their own budget because they don't want to ask too much. They don't want to come across that they're taking advantage, or they don't want to feel like they're asking too much from their employer or their manager. And that's not the approach I want our team to take. I want them to dream of the perfect solution, put it forward, and then we tell them, hey, you're asking for a budget of 100K. For this project, the budget's going to be more like 10K. So what can we cut? And we go from the dream of having everything, and then we cut things down to get to what's plausible. And that's how we accomplish the cost side. Is I want the team to be able to dream and build the best thing they can possibly imagine. And I'm the guy that's restricting them. And that's just the reality of it. And I'll do what I can to bring in as much money so we don't get restricted in that process.
That seems like a really useful way to set things up, where you're at least hearing and seeing what the ideal state is for each of these portions of the team, and then really kind of trying to weigh things against each other and get the best solution out into real life.
Yeah, and everything else you can prioritize, like you cut 10 things. Okay, well, number 1 on the list, you know what, if we exceed our sales goal by 10%, we can now add this to the list because we got the cash. So like it creates like a priority sequence. It makes it more exciting. And I really do not want to squander the team's dreams and passions and make them feel trapped in a box. I want them to know that box will grow and expand, and that we're building on that timeline, and that they get to be part of that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like a very iterative process where, you kind of just keep building and keep optimizing and keep making things better and better.
Yeah, exactly. Iterative is a great term.
We've been talking a lot about high-level strategy. We've been talking a lot about finding co-founders, finding technical collaborators, but maybe to zoom in even further, wondering what is the day-to-day like for a neurotech executive like you?
Yeah, and we're earlier stage. We're raising around. That eats up a lot of time. Raising around, it eats up more time. When you're not raising around, it still eats up time. I think that's one thing I've read and been advised on many times is once you finish one round, you're raising the next one the next day. It's just a reality of it. You're not doing it that you're not actively pushing, but you need to keep those connections, those conversations. You need to find who's the right fit. And it's just so much easier. When you're working with investors, you're talking about a years long partnership. It's not once they sign you the check, it's done. You're working with these people regularly. You need to be comfortable with them. You need to build that trust, that relationship. So that eats up a lot of my time on my day-to-day. I actually do all the customer service myself right now. Again, we're earlier stage. So if you email us, if you message us, I'm the one responding directly myself. It takes up a good chunk of time, but it makes it super clear for me what, same thing when I review those user needs, what's the top priority, what's the most important thing when I'm hearing this feedback on a regular basis and getting all these conversations going. So that's why I handle all of that directly myself currently. And then on top of that, I'm managing budgets. There's setting up our supply chain SOPs. There's the finance side of things. And of course, like product development timelines, making sure everything's on track, that the team has what they need to hit the targets. Yeah, it's a bit of a widespread. I'm looking forward to growing the team and spreading out the workload a little bit, but I did this to myself, so I can't really blame anyone.
Yeah, as you mentioned, definitely a lot to juggle, especially in an early stage company where you don't necessarily have specialists working on each of these tasks, and sometimes if there's nobody else to do it, it falls on the CEO. And I think that's a really important point you made though about responding to the customer support, customer requests. I think especially in an early stage company, that sounds like an amazing way to really learn about what the customers want, what the customers need, and what the customers are thinking.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, your biggest investors are your customers, and they're going to tell you what to develop and what you need to develop. So that's kind of how I view it. Is our customers are our biggest investors. We need to make sure that we're listening to them, that we're working with them as we build.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for perhaps students or young professionals that want to work in the field of neurotech or are looking to pivot towards neurotech?
Yes. I'm trying to think of the best way to word this, because I'm looking at this as an executive side of things. I don't want to speak to go talk to this professor or pursue this education. That's not what I did. I can't really speak to that. I don't want to speak out of turn. The one thing I guess I would say is that neurotech as a field is functionally a startup. It's still very much in its early stages. So you really need to love having impact. If that's not like the main driver for you, it's not going to be a cushy field for a long time. It's going to be rapidly changing. It's going to be going through this incredible growth, which is super exciting if you're into having that incredible growth and having that impact. If you're looking for something a little more steady and routine, I wouldn't suggest neurotech as a field. I'm sure there are some companies where that'll be okay, but I think generally as a field, we're going to see some absolutely insane growth in next 10, 20, 30 years. And with that comes discomfort. So you need to love having that impact because it's not going to be an easy field, but it's going to be impactful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It really is a new field, and it does seem to be like there's a lot of changes and a lot of growth on the horizon for this field coming up. So I think that's definitely important for the students or young professionals interested in this space to keep in mind. Something that you mentioned in your response there is you're often like looking at this field and thinking about this field from the perspective of an executive. And we've already touched on a little bit of this advice already, but wondering if you have any additional advice for potential founders, looking to start a business in neurotech or neuroscience related field.
Yeah. Neuroscience, I think, depending if you go like the software route, you have a lot more flexibility because if you make a mistake, you can change it and you're good to move forward. Neurotech, if you're doing anything in hardware, the expression hardware is hard. I am living that. I can assure you it's true. I think the standard of advice, I think if you start looking into the founder's side and entrepreneurial journey, usually the advice is, hey, just start, just get out in the world and work. I would push against that on the neurotech side because you really need to understand the scope of what you're getting yourself into. Generally speaking, investors want to have a product that they can touch and feel. And to get to that point, easily could be $100,000. Probably more, very, very likely more. So you're looking at a huge bill that you could be entering yourself into, and you need to find a way to fund that, either yourself, family, what have you. That is a huge bill that you need to plan for. And then there's time. We also talked about the time of iterations, where you're looking at months at a time. It's going to take you years to get moving. So understanding the scope of what you're getting yourself into, I think, is important in this case. Because if you just start and you start dumping in money, and then a year and a half down the line, your life completely changes, or you're hoping to have launched by then, you'll probably be quite disappointed and have to back out. So you need to understand, like, okay, this is a 3 to 5 year thing. before I actually get this into customers' hands, at least 3 to 5 years, and that's your expectation going into it, then you're in a position to actually approach the space in a proper way.
Yeah, as you mentioned, hardware is hard, and yeah, this scoping aspect super important. Super important to understand what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, 100%.
And so we've talked a little bit about how you view the field of neurotechnology as almost like a startup kind of field. And so that that kind of pushes me to ask if you have any predictions for that growth of the field that you mentioned, and what kinds of impacts it can have, and really just what the field might look like over the long term, perhaps over the next 20 years or so.
Yeah, I love this question. The way I see like the neurotech field right now is kind of like what nutrition was, 60 years ago. I think the first vitamin was synthesized in like 1926, and it took a little bit of time for it to get to mainstream. But 100 years ago, you didn't really have much choice over your diet. You didn't have a global supply chain. You couldn't get raspberries year round. You might not ever be able to have access to raspberries depending where you live. And that completely changed as the world globalized, and we became much more aware of the importance of nutrition and how it impacted our health. And now that's an absolutely massive market. What you eat is so crucial to your health. The way I see neurotech is kind of like at that similar precipice of, we're starting to understand the importance of brain health, and we're kind of quickly learning, it's arguably the most important aspect of our health. And we're in a stage where we're starting to be able to get to choose what our brain health is. I think 30 years ago, your brain health was what your brain health was. There's not much you can do about it. Even today, it's still difficult for the general population to have options to improve their health. And I think we're coming over that hump, and we're starting to have that ability to choose what our brain health is and make conscious decisions and impact to improve that. And I think neurotech and neuromodulation will become incredibly common. And I think it'll become more important than what you eat in terms of your health and your experience in life. I see the field of neurotech, it's building that virtuous cycle right now, right? Like neurotech, we're getting some improvements, it's leading to more findings and research, which leads to more improvements, which leads to more findings and research, and it's starting to build this virtuous cycle of growth. And I think it's ready to explode. I think, neurotech on your head will become the next phone in your pocket in the next 20 to 30 years. I believe that.
Definitely sounds like some exciting times ahead, and I hope these predictions come true, because it sounds like it could be helpful for both the long-term and short-term health for a lot of people.
100%, yeah. It'll change the world.
Absolutely. Do you have any content recommendations for the audience? It could be related to sleep, it could be related to neuroscience, could be something, something completely different, and perhaps maybe like a book, a podcast, even a scientific paper.
Yeah, this podcast, definitely give this podcast a listen and subscribe. Must have. There is the Neurotech X community I mentioned earlier. They're great spot to find jobs. But it's not just jobs. They have community meetups. They have a lot on there. I definitely check them out as well. Olav Krugolson, Dr. Olav Krugolson has a podcast. It's quick sound bites, 15 minutes. It's solid too. I think it's a fantastic one, especially whatever you're cooking a meal. It's a quick way to learn some. And I like the short form podcast style. It's a little bit different. Yeah, on the sleep side of things, the book Inconvenient Sleep is fantastic, by Pat Byrne. Definitely give it a check. Give it a look. It's a fantastic read.
Yeah, well, first off, I really appreciate the recommendation of this podcast, and I'll definitely be sure to check out all the other items you mentioned. Looking forward to looking into those.
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Should our listeners contact you for further discussion after the episode? And if so, who should reach out to you? How can they reach out to you? And what are some of the key topics that you would want to, be reached out to about, be it potential collaborations, investor, customers? What kind of people would you like to reach out to you?
Yeah, all of the above. I keep it very open. I am quite adamant about growing the neurotech field as a whole. I don't see it as a field that competition, more people entering the field leads to a problem. I think it'll grow. I think the pie will just get bigger. So anyone that's interested at all, investors, collaborators, customers, people curious about the space, I'm happy to chat and talk about it and be supportive wherever I can. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. That'll probably be the most direct, or you can also email me directly. Email is just Michael, Michael, at getbia.com, GETBIA. Just reach out directly. I'm happy to help and support in whatever way I can to grow the field.
Yeah, sounds great. And I don't think I had any additional like specific questions for you today, but before we sign off, I wanted to just ask you, is there anything else we haven't discussed yet that you'd like to mention or bring up?
I mean, I need to promote the business because the experience is like no other. Like, it is an absolute incredible experience. That surround sound, the sunlight, it's such a pleasant way to wake up. It's a great way to fall asleep. Yeah, every detail has been meticulously thought through. The comfort was absolutely vital to us. Huge piece of it. The sound, the drivers we use, the chips we have on there. We put an incredible amount of detail, a thought into every detail in the mass. So definitely just give us a try on that front. And yeah, I think I've covered everything else. I think that would be a good part for me to cut myself off and stop talking.
All right. Well, listeners, make sure to give Bia a try. I'll be sure to link their website in the show notes so you can find out more. And I just wanted to say, Michael, this has been a really interesting conversation. It's been much appreciated that you took some time out of your busy day to talk with me today. I feel like we learned a lot from you, and looking forward to keeping in touch.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it was an honor.